Yes, I sure will. And I encourage anyone who watches this who is not sure how to explain this to other people, maybe you can use the way that I explain this. We've all heard it. Jesus died for our sins. But why did he have to die? And what does that mean? Why does Jesus' death equal our salvation? God says the wages of sin is death. Sin is missing the mark, and sin over generation after generation after generation has literally changed our image. That's what Satan is after. He wants to change the image of humans so we no longer identify with God or with Christ. We live inside of God's creation. This creation is a legal system. Legal systems and rules don't care about our feelings. They just are. They're set into place for a specific function. So legally, the wages of sin is death. This is energetically what happens when we sin. You see this in the fruit. Like, look into what sin is, look into what God says sin is, and then look at the fruit down the line. Every time it leads to death, whether that's early death, whether that is a life of spiritual death, it does. God is a just God. He maintains perfect righteousness, perfect function across creation. That's why we can track things like math, like frequency, like everything has its place. So because we fell so deep into sin nature, we were legally no longer allowed to be in the presence of God. We were incompatible. Since the fall, God has been attempting to teach us how to get back in his presence because he loves us. He wants us to be with him, and there's no better place for us to be than with God in his presence. So God continued to speak. He spoke through morality. He spoke through the law of the Old Testament, endless rules, endless rituals, endless sacrifices. But it wouldn't stay, and no one could follow all of the laws because we had sin nature. We're so deep in sin nature that you can't fulfill all of the law. God's holy standard is far beyond what we can achieve on our own. So the fullness of God is born into Jesus. Jesus lived a sinless life so he could be the eternal sacrifice for human beings. Jesus is basically the bridge that allowed for God to fulfill his own law legally to allow us back into his presence because he knew we couldn't do it by ourselves. It's beautiful and it makes sense. God sent his son to take the punishment that we deserve, even though he was completely innocent, to reconcile us back to himself. That is how much he loves us, even though we're so flawed, bro.